Let's talk about React components. We don't usually work with React elements directly like that. Instead, we use components. For example, the top level component is usually an app component, and we define the component as a constant. A React component is simply a function, and in that function, we return the HTML that we care about, just like that. Let's go ahead and change this to make sure it's working and refresh. There you go. So you'll notice that I am using the component just as if it was a regular HTML element. We can actually think of HTML elements as built-in components, and React Components is here to extend our capabilities of HTML elements. React Components are super useful. They first allow us to write code that's more readable. We can also reuse React components. For example, let's make this component reusable. So let's pass a variable to this component. I'm going to call this variable header message. And this is just a string. In React components, we call these variables props. And the React component actually receives these props in here as an argument to the function. And inside the component DOM, we can use these props. So let's do props.header message in here. And you'll notice ESLint is giving us an error. I'll get back to this error in a little bit, but we can go ahead and test this. So whatever we pass here, we can reuse in the component. This makes this component reusable with multiple header messages. That's one other benefit of React component. We can also compose bigger components from smaller components. In here, we actually composed the app component using an h2 element. If I have another component, I can use it inside the app component, which is what we're going to do in a little bit. But let me talk about this ESLint error that we get here. First, notice that these errors are not really errors. The app is still rendering, but it's highly recommended that you fix all these errors before you do anything. So this error says header message is missing in props validation. This is our clue that any prop that we pass to a React component has to be part of a prop validation. We use prop validations in React to validate the type of the values for these props. And this is done using app.proptypes, which is just an object. This is a React API. And inside this object, we put the actual props that we want to validate as keys and the type of these props as value. This particular header message is a string. We use another React API to do the prop validation. The syntax is proptypes.string. When we save, the ESLint error is gone, and we can test things is still the same, but now I have prop validation. This means if I don't pass a string, for example, let's pass a number, and we try to render the app with a header message that has the wrong type, React is going to give us a very clear warning. Header message is expected to be a string. The other validation that we should always do, say that we do have a header message, but we tried to render the component without a value for it. React will actually just render without any errors and without any output here, and this sometimes is a problem. It would be great if React tells us that the app component uses a header message and it was called without a header message. To accomplish this, we can chain an isRequired call in here. IsRequired means this header message has to have a value. You cannot use the component without a header message. Let's test. And now we have a clear warning that says header message was not specified. One other feature we can use with components is the default values for props. The syntax is default props. And in here, it's also another object. And the keys for the object are the properties that we want to supply a default value for. And the values are the default values. So let's do hello here. And since we have a default value, we don't need to make this property required because we can now use the component without the header message property, and we're going to use the default value for the header message property. Let's test. So make sure that you always use props validation. And if you have any default values, you can use the default props feature.